Today on Better Book Clubs, the best Twitter feeds for readers. I just recently got back on Twitter after being off for a few years, and I find that I really enjoy it more than any other social media outlet. I have control over what I see, so sometimes you hear people complaining about Twitter being inflated or inflammatory, but you can choose on Twitter what you want to see and what you don't. Just quickly, anytime I log on, whatever I see, whenever I scroll through, there's always something interesting there. So today I thought I would share with you some of the best Twitter feeds for readers and book clubs to follow. And they break down into 5 categories. So the first category I want to share is bookstores, and I'm going to actually just give you 3 suggestions in each category, so this doesn't get too overwhelming. But I picked 3 bookstores that are in 3 different cities. The first one is the Strand Bookstore in New York City at Strand Bookstore. The second one is Powell's in Portland, Oregon, which is at Powell's. And the third one is Politics and Prose in Washington, D.C., Politics Prose. And all 3 of these bookstores are going to tell you what new books have just come out, so it's a good way to keep tabs on what the brand new books are that bookstores really want you to know about. But the really cool thing that's happening now is that a lot of these bookstores are also sponsoring virtual events, and so you'll hear about those as well if you follow these bookstores and others on Twitter. The second category I want to share with you is small presses on Twitter. And I've done a video before about small presses and just becoming aware that they're out there, because some of the best books published every year come from our small presses, but because they don't have the same big presence, you're not going to find them on the front table at Barnes & Noble, for example. But you can find them on Twitter, and what you'll find is often, again, as with the big bookstores, you're going to find them publicizing the new releases, the books that they've just published that are brand new that you might not hear about otherwise. So these are a great source for kind of outside the margins readings that you might be interested in. The first publisher I want to mention is Algonquin Books at Algonquin Books. And they publish literary fiction and also creative nonfiction. Algonquin posts pretty frequently, and so they're a great Twitter feed to follow. Then we also have Red Hen Press at Red Hen Press, and they also have an email newsletter that you can sign up for. So if you really like the tweets and you really like the kinds of books that they publish, you can just click through to their website from Twitter and sign up for that email newsletter as well. And finally, we have at Grove Atlantic. Grove Atlantic Press has actually been around since 1917. And what they have right now is a feature called Grove at Home, where they're posting links to mostly videos every day, something new and different. And so you'll hear about that on Twitter, but again, you can also subscribe to that if you want to receive that directly in your inbox. The third category I want to mention is literary journals. Now, there are lots of print literary journals out there, and they're on Twitter, but I'm going to mention 3 of them that are actually online journals that have some really amazing content. So again, if you like what you're seeing in their Twitter feeds, it's really easy to just jump over to their websites and see what else is going on. The first one I want to mention is Electric Literature at Electric Lit. And if you're a writer, they're actually offering workshops now for a very small fee. So if you happen to be interested in learning more about writing, Electric Literature is a great place to go, not just for good things to read, but also for a little bit of training and workshopping. Another online magazine I really like is The Millions at The Millions. And they have a very regular Tuesday new release tweet that they'll put out so that you'll know exactly what's being released. Tuesday, by the way, is the typical day on which new books get released. And there's some publishing logic to that, which I won't get into right now. But The Millions will help you keep up with that. They also have some kind of fun lists that they maintain, must read, poetry, writers to watch, top 10 books to purchase. Again, this comes from their website, but they tweet a lot of this material as well. So Twitter's a great place without having to manually go into a bunch of websites. Twitter's a really great place to keep track of what's going on, and then you can jump off into a website if you obviously follow the link straight from the tweet. Also in the category of literary journals is Rattle, an online magazine. Their tagline is Poetry Without Pretension, and you can find them at Rattle Mag. I really love that unpretentious angle that they're going after. So they're publishing really excellent poems, but they're avoiding poetry that's over intellectualized. They're just going to give you a poem, and often they're going to give you audio of the poet reading it as well. And I find that especially interesting and fun to listen to as I read along. They're also going to give you one poem at a time, so you don't feel overwhelmed by an entire collection or an entire literary journal full of poetry. Rattle Mag is a great handle to follow. There are also a ton of writers tweeting on Twitter, but some of them are better than others. So depending on your political leanings, you might be interested in following some of these famous writers who are tweeting, who have a lot of political content in their tweets. But I thought I would focus today on 3 writers who actually tweet a lot of content of interest to general interest to readers. The writer Paulo Coelho is one of the most inspirational writers to follow on Twitter. He tends to tweet a lot of inspirational quotations. He also happens to do that in both English and Portuguese, and sometimes he'll talk about his work and other things he's doing. So he's one great writer to follow and quite prolific with tweeting. So is the writer Terry McMillan. You'll get tons of tweets if you sign on to follow Terry McMillan. And there is some political content there, but she's also really has a lot of just ordinary everyday thoughts that she shares. She's almost like stream of consciousness, sharing what she's thinking all day long. You probably know McMillan best from her books Waiting to Exhale and Stella Gets Her Groove Back. And then a kind of outsider choice for readers who are also interested in the publishing industry. Joanna Penn is a really interesting writer to follow. She tweets at The Creative Pen, and she is going to give you an inside look at independent publishing. So what indie authors go through in order to get their books put together, written, edited, published, and out there to you as a reader. So for those of you who are interested in kind of a peek behind the curtain, Joanna Penn is a great writer to follow. And finally, I couldn't resist throwing in a few miscellaneous handles for you to follow. One of them is Book Riot, at Book Riot, and they're going to be a great source for helping you find books that you would enjoy reading. In fact, that's pretty much everything you get from Book Riot is book after book after book that might be of interest to you. Another great account to follow on Twitter is by Maria Popova. She runs a website called Brain Pickings, and her handle on Twitter is at BrainPicker. Here you're going to get interesting, quite intellectual, sometimes musings on different writers and books and thinkers, and they're also written in long form, kind of an interesting, immersive experience to read her pieces. And again, those are not going to be in full on Twitter, but she's going to link to them and you're going to be able to hop over to her website when something piques your curiosity. I also really like the online magazine Long Reads. They cover science, nature, food, crime, sports, lots of different topics. They're compiled from other publications. They don't do a whole lot of their own material, so it's more like a curation site, but it's a great site to go to for long reads. They're at Long Reads. And find a piece that you really are interested in that you can kind of sit back and enjoy. That's not just going to be one of those quick one-off throwaway pieces that you find in a lot of publications today. To keep my Twitter feed organized, I use an app called Tweetdeck, which you can use for free. Just Google it and you'll find it, and I'll actually leave the link below as well. I like Tweetdeck because it'll set my Twitter up in columns. And so I have my main feed, but it's also going to separate out. It'll show me my own tweets and people who've mentioned me and people who've responded to me. And then it also gives me the chance to make some columns with hashtags. Unfortunately, the hashtags, for the most part, I've found have become very crowded lately. I'll admit, when I post a new video, I'll often post it to a bunch of hashtags, some of which I'm active on separately and some of which I'm not. And the problem is that the hashtags, if you use them, tend not to be really engaging real people in conversation anymore. I find it's actually better to just curate my own feed, find the people I'm interested in following, and then I can always reply to something they've said and get a conversation going that way. Of course, I'm also on Twitter. You can follow me at KLCPL. I'll put that and all of the other Twitter links below so that you can decide who you're interested in following. And if you're a Twitter user, I would love to know. Tell us in the comments below who it is that you like to follow. As always, if you like what you see here, please remember to subscribe, and I'll be back soon with another episode of Better Book Clubs.